hasn't reached for her. Not yet, she hasn't invited it. But she hasn't left either. If she collapses now, they won't be able to lift her. If she walks away, they may never find her again. If she stays, there's a chance. One more drink. Then she backs slightly, not far, and lowers herself onto her knees. Slowly, carefully. The dust rises around her as she folds her body to the earth. Not giving up, not dying. Just resting where she knows someone saw her. Elias stays at the fence. He sits. The sun climbs higher. Somewhere in the distance, a bird calls once. Then silence returns. The risk is clear. If she doesn't eat today, her organs could begin to fail. If infection sets in from whatever wound she's hiding, time narrows. But for now, she's still breathing. Still seen. And for the first time in weeks, she's not walking alone. The sky held no clouds by midday. Heat pulsed off the wire fence as the wind dropped. She hadn't moved much in over an hour. Her breathing had slowed but not settled. One leg stayed tucked under her weight. The other stretched awkwardly out, cracked and swollen around the ankle joint. A ring of flies circled her ribs, then scattered. She was still watching. Elias stayed nearby, sitting cross-legged in the dust just beyond the outer line. He said nothing. He didn't bring food yet. There was no reason to push. Her stillness was not peace. It cost every ounce of her energy now spent on staying upright, keeping air in her lungs, and tracking movement around her. When she blinked, the skin around her sockets twitched like paper. A younger ranger offered to bring a tarp for shade. Elias shook his head gently. The sun had been part of her world long before them. What mattered now was not shade. It was space. Just after one, she stirred. Not a full motion. Not a rise. Her trunk curled slowly from the dust, reaching forward like it was moving through water. It didn't lift high. It only grazed the first wooden post. Then paused. The gesture wasn't directed, not a search for food or touch. Just an act of remembering. She knew this wood. Its scent. Its location. Elephants don't forget, they often say. But what mattered now was not memory. It was what she chose to do next. Elias didn't stand. He simply adjusted his posture and waited. At 5 meters, she was close enough to smell him. His sweat, the soap he used, and the light chemical trace of the outpost's canvas water tank. Still, she didn't raise her ears. She didn't flare her trunk. She only watched. Then she did something rare, something almost no one had seen. She leaned, not in collapse, not from exhaustion. She leaned forward, her head brushing the post, the side of her face pressing against the coarse wood like a tired shoulder to a door frame. Her eyes remained half closed. Her trunk dropped again to the ground. The fence didn't shock. That section had long been deactivated during the dry season. Elias knew it. Maybe she did too. He rose slowly, not breaking the line between them. He walked 5 steps closer, then crouched again. She didn't retreat. Her flank twitched once, a soft ripple of movement, like wind in fabric. From behind him, someone whispered, "She trusts him." But Elias knew better. This wasn't trust, not yet. This was permission, silent, brief, and uncertain. He laid down a folded towel soaked in water. Not close, just near enough for scent. Her ears twitched once. Her trunk reached again, touched the edge of the cloth, then pulled back. Still too weak to fully claim it. Still watching. If she stayed this passive, dehydration would follow within days. If infection had already taken hold, especially from the swelling in her leg, her chances would shrink by the hour. Yet forcing fluids, forcing care, and even forcing shade could break whatever boundary she had chosen to lower. This wasn't just rescue. It was rhythm. And she had just set the tempo. A quiet passed between them again. This time not empty. The wind returned, carrying dust along the fence line. A weaver bird called from a distant branch, its trill sharp and high in the stillness. "She's listening," Elias said softly, mostly to himself, and the elephant, still pressed against the post, exhaled long and low. Not in pain, not in warning, but in something far older. Surrender, maybe, or simply a moment of being seen. The wind shifted slightly by mid-afternoon, brushing grit across the fence line and lifting the loose folds of skin along her shoulders. She had not moved from the post in over an hour. Her trunk lay curled in the dirt, still and unresponsive, though her ears twitched now and then at the flies. Elias remained within sight, kneeling in the shade of a thorn bush. 2 other rangers approached slowly from the north, bringing fresh water and cut fruit. They stopped without a word, placed the basin near the first post, and backed away. It was the first time the team could see her closely in full light. Her ribs stretched in sharp, uneven rows along both sides, each one pronounced and rigid like the frame of a broken umbrella. Her stomach was hollowed in, the kind of empty that comes not just from days without food, but from weeks of depletion. Her skin, once smooth, was now mottled and cracked, stained with dried mud and streaks of old blood near the rear flank. The bones of her face seemed to protrude through her temples. Her eyelids hung low, lined with pale crust and shadow. These were not signs of recent struggle. This was a long-term collapse. She didn't reach for the fruit. She didn't reach at all. She breathed once, deeply, and let out a sound so soft it barely moved the dust, a groan, long and low, like wood under pressure. Then her front legs began to tremble. It started at the knees, moved downward, and ended in a buckle. Slowly she lowered herself onto the earth, folding with the measured surrender of an animal who had done this before. The dust rose around her like breath. Her eyes remained half-lidded. She did not resist. She simply lay there, trunk slack, as if her weight had finally caught up to her will. Elias stood but didn't move closer. He watched her shoulders rise and fall, slow and uneven. From this distance, he could now see the scar tissue around her left hip, an old wound, likely from a snare or sharp rock. Her back leg twitched, then went still. The second basin of water remained untouched. Flies. She didn't shake them off. A ranger whispered, "If she doesn't feed by nightfall." He didn't finish. The risk was now immediate. If she failed to take fluid by dusk, dehydration would begin to impair her kidneys. If infection had taken root in the leg, and the swelling around the joint suggested it had, her immune system might already be breaking down. If there was a calf out there somewhere, it was either gone or too far to matter. She had arrived alone. That much was now certain. Still, there was something in the way she had leaned, not desperate, not pleading, just willing. That gesture remained in the air, like a footprint not yet filled with dust. Elias signaled for silence and waited. A single crow passed overhead. The fence wires creaked slightly in the breeze. Then her trunk moved. It wasn't a reach. It was a shift, curling inward against her chest like the last position of rest. Her eyes closed fully for the first time. Not sleep, not death, just withdrawal. A pause. A space between what she needed and what she could no longer ask for. Elias stepped back. He crouched once more, not speaking. The others followed suit. Nothing else would happen now, not until she chose to rise. If she rose. In the tall grass beyond the post, the wind caught a dry seed pod and carried it along the fence. It rolled once, then stopped. For 3 days she did not rise, not once. The ground around her grew patterned with water stains and softened fruit skins, and the slow rhythm of her breath pressed into the dust. The sun shifted in its arc, but her body barely moved. Her ears twitched against flies. Her chest rose and fell in the heat. Her trunk, when it lifted, only did so to curl back beneath her chin. Not once did she reach toward the basins again. The fruit turned sweet in the sun, then spoiled. Still she stayed. Each morning, Elias and the others returned. They brought fresh water in tin buckets, silent and careful in their steps. They cleaned the old pieces of fruit and replaced them with melon, pawpaw, and shaved sugarcane pulled from deeper stores. But she did not eat. They didn't speak in her presence. Only nodded, poured gently, then backed away. Nothing was forced. If she refused again, they'd try again. And again. On the second day, a vet from Nairobi arrived. She didn't approach. From a distance, she studied the swelling in the rear leg and made quiet notes. There was no infection visible at the surface, no pus or open wounds, but the lack of movement risked pressure sores, necrosis, or further internal damage. "We don't touch her yet," the vet said plainly. "She's watching. That's enough. Sedation would carry risk. Intervention without permission could break the fragile space she'd chosen to enter. And if her systems were beginning to fail, any procedure could send her over. What remained now was breath. Breath, shade, and water. That was the scale of hope. By dusk on the second day, clouds rolled in from the west and broke apart before reaching the fence. There was no rain. Just the low change of temperature and a silence across the dry plain. A herd had been spotted north of the riverbank, but they hadn't approached. Rangers logged the movement. None had matching scars or recent births. If this one had been part of them, they would have left her behind. The third morning arrived quiet and still. The sun rose pale behind a veil of dust. Elias came alone at dawn, carrying one bucket and a folded cloth. He stopped short of the line and waited, as he had done each time. She hadn't shifted since the evening before. Her sides lifted shallowly. Her eyes were closed. He thought perhaps she had passed in the night. He stepped closer, just enough to check the rise of her ribs. Then slowly, her trunk lifted. Not far. Just a brief coil in the dust. She did not reach for water. But it was motion-controlled and deliberate. And then her head moved, barely more than a tilt. But it turned, fraction by fraction, until her left eye opened toward him. It did not widen. It did not blink twice. But it held. A gaze, not a glance. Elias stood still. "You're still here," he said softly. Her eye closed again. But she did not turn away. She was not rising. Not yet, but her breath had steadied. Her trunk remained slightly uncurled, and for the first time in 3 days, she had chosen to look. It was not enough to call it progress. But it was not nothing. And for a life balanced between stillness and surrender, even the smallest shift mattered. The sun passed overhead. The wind carried dry seeds along the wire. The fruit began to sour again in the heat. But she breathed, and she had seen him. By the 4th morning, her breathing had stabilized. Not strong, but regular. Her ears no longer hung flat along her skull, and though she hadn't stood, her posture had shifted. Not collapsed, but folded. Still holding, still watching. The decision came quietly between the rangers and the vet. Today they would check her properly. Not by force, not with tranquilizer. Only if she allowed them near. A small team of 3 arrived just after sunrise. One carried antiseptic solution. Another brought gauze and a portable irrigation kit. The vet, Dr. Kamari, had worked these planes for years. She spoke little as she approached, walking wide and slow. Elias was already seated near the fence, arms resting on his knees, his voice low and steady. The elephant hadn't turned away. Her body told the story in layers, each curve marked by age and deprivation, each fold of skin a map of places she'd passed without help. But when Dr. Kamari knelt closer, she saw something more pressing. Just behind the front leg, tucked beneath the rise of her belly and hidden from view until now, a wound curved through the skin like a split seam. It wasn't fresh. The edges were darkened, crusted with dried soil, and embedded with thorns. But deep inside, it pulsed faintly, pink, wet, and open. It was likely wire. A snare left behind in a broken fence line, or rusted metal buried beneath brush in her search for roots. She may have torn it days ago, even weeks. It hadn't bled out, but it hadn't healed either. And with each hour of stillness, it drew her closer to systemic collapse. Kamari didn't speak at first. She reached gently, placing a cloth near the wound to test the temperature of the skin. The elephant flinched, not violently, but enough to ripple her side. Her trunk moved toward Elias, curling once in the dust before stilling again. Then came a sound, low, guttural, almost like a sigh pushed from deep inside her chest. A single groan. "Don't panic." No warning, but pain. "It's okay," Elias whispered, barely above a breath. The work had to be fast and clean. The wound was rinsed first with saline, then with a mild antiseptic. Pus spilled from one edge, thick and yellowed, but not foul enough to suggest full infection yet. Kamari packed the crevice with gauze soaked in cooled honey, the most natural option available and the only one tolerated well without sedation. No one raised their voice. No one rushed, and the elephant, though tense, did not rise. She grumbled once more, then went still again. What was at risk now became clear. If the wound turned septic, it would spread inward faster than her organs could resist. If they had waited another 2 days, her chances would have narrowed to nothing. But now, there was a window. Narrow, fragile, but real. They left the site quiet again by midday. Only Elias remained behind. The buckets were refilled. New fruit was laid gently along the shaded edge. She didn't touch it, but she turned her head once toward the fence post, then toward him. Her trunk stayed curled, her ribs still showed, but her breathing remained steady. And the wound had been seen. The wind moved the dry leaves just behind her flank. Somewhere farther off, a dove called twice from the acacia thorns. Elias didn't answer. He only sat, watching her breathe. Her eye closed slowly, and the dust beneath her shifted gently, as if sighing with her. The wind shifted before sunrise. A colder current moved through the dry brush near the acacias, lifting a curtain of dust that hung over the ground like breath. Elias was already seated beneath the same thorn bush, his hands folded loosely in his lap. The others hadn't arrived yet. The elephant lay in her usual place, her body curved toward the fence line, the gauze beneath her still clean but damp with dew. Her breathing, though slow, held steady through the dark. Then came the sound. It didn't start loud. A single cry, soft, cracked, almost like the yelp of a bird, broke through the silence. Elias looked up. Not from the west where her head rested. From the trees behind. Another call followed. Not rhythmic, not strong. Just one thin, uneven moan pushed into the morning. Her ears twitched before Elias could even rise. Her body didn't move, but her trunk lifted slightly, curling once in the dust, then falling still again. Elias stood, carefully, slowly. He stepped past the fence line and toward the ridge of undergrowth near the acacias. The light pre-dawn, enough to blur silhouettes. But something moved through the grass, not fast. Not large, a calf emerged from the trees. Wobbly, unsure, his legs shaking beneath him with every step. His ears hung low, nearly touching the stalks that bent beneath him. His ribs, too, were faintly visible, though not sunken. He was young, not yet weaned, but past the stage of nursing alone. Dust clung to the fine hair between his shoulders. He paused, looked once toward Elias, then forward again. His steps pulled him toward the scent on the wind, a scent he had followed through the night. When the mother lifted her head, it was the first time she had moved it fully in nearly 2 days. Her trunk rose, curling slightly. She did not call. She did not trumpet, but her eyes opened wider than before. She watched him come closer, 10 meters, then 6, then 1. The calf stumbled at the last step and collapsed beside her flank. A low groan escaped him, not fear. She shifted. Slowly. Her trunk brushed over his back, paused, then fell again. Her breath deepened. For the first time, the muscles in her legs contracted as though to lift. She didn't rise, but she turned inch by inch until her side met his. The calf rested his head against her ribs and stilled. They had searched records for any recent herds with young calves. None had passed this way. None had been seen alone. Wherever he had come from, he had come far, and come alone. She had not come to the fence to be seen. She had come to bring him somewhere he might be seen. The risks now had multiplied. The calf was dehydrated. He needed more than water. He needed protection, food, and space to nurse or transition to soft greens. If she died before he grew stronger, he wouldn't survive. If she recovered but he weakened, she wouldn't leave without him. They were tied now, by bond and by biology. Elias stepped back and radioed for assistance. The vet would need to examine the calf soon, but not yet. The bond came first, and this moment, her movement, her touch, his presence, could not be interrupted. The other rangers waited by the gate, silent. As the sun rose behind them, its light touched only the edge of the dust near the trees. The mother lay still again, but no longer alone. The calf's breaths were short but even. Their bodies, though worn and thin, pressed together gently in the soft silence of the plain. The fence line held no threat now. Only witness, the calf didn't leave her side. Through the warm hours of the morning, he leaned against her ribs, resting in the shallow shade her body cast. His ears fluttered weakly, and once he tried to suckle, but she didn't shift. Her trunk moved slightly in response, brushing his back, pausing just beneath his chin. Their breathing matched, slow, uneven, but alive. The wound beneath her belly remained open but clean. The gauze had stayed in place, thanks more to stillness than healing. Elias sat nearby, the same steady distance he had kept for days. He had spoken once, only once, when she stirred earlier, whispering a soft reassurance as she curled her trunk. The vet had left with instructions to observe, not interfere. If she stood, it would have to be her own choice. If not, the chances for both would narrow by the hour. Her muscles would begin to waste. His hydration would slip beyond saving. Just after midday, the calf stirred again. He shifted his weight, clumsily pressing his shoulder into her flank. It wasn't purposeful, just need, a gesture born from hunger and instinct. But it was enough. Her eyes opened. Slowly, her breath changed, deeper this time. Her front leg moved, the first time in nearly 4 days. It twitched, folded slightly, then extended. She didn't groan, didn't trumpet. Her trunk lifted, curling once toward her own chest, then outward toward the calf's back. She touched him. A firm, brief press. Then, with deliberate effort, she began to rise. It wasn't quick. One leg braced, another buckled. Dust rolled from beneath her side as she shifted her weight inch by inch. Her back legs hesitated, trembling visibly beneath her sunken frame. The calf stepped back instinctively, his own balance unsure. Her ears lifted, not wide but alert. And with one deep exhale, loud enough to hush even the birds nearby, she pushed herself fully upright. For a moment she stood motionless. Her body shook. Her ribs strained under the weight. But she stood. The folds along her flank swayed gently with the wind. The calf pressed his head into her front leg. She didn't move away. Her trunk curled over him just once, then dropped again. From the tree line, one ranger lowered his binoculars. Elias did not speak. He remained where he was, still crouched, hands resting on his knees. But the shift had happened. She had done what no one dared expect. Not for herself, but for the calf. The risks remained. Her weight would not return overnight. Her wound could still worsen. The calf would need supplemental feeding, but standing meant blood moved again. Muscles worked. Hope lived in motion now, not just breath. She took one step forward. Then another. Small, slow, but steady. The calf followed. Dust lifted around their feet as they turned slightly from the fence and paused near the thorn bush where Elias sat. She looked at him, eyes open and level. He didn't move. He only whispered, "You're almost there." The wind shifted once more through the dry grass. It carried the scent of acacia blooms just beginning to open in the distance. And under the soft sky, with ribs still showing and legs still trembling, she remained standing. Beside her, the calf leaned against her chest again. Neither moved. But they no longer lay waiting. They were upright. Together. Alive. By late afternoon, the light shifted low across the plain, turning every dry blade of grass a dull gold. The heat had softened, but the air still carried the weight of long days and longer silences. The mother stood just beyond the fence, her front legs slightly bent, the calf pressed against her side. She had not walked far, only a few meters, but she had stayed on her feet. Her ribs were still prominent. Her joints still trembled now and then, but she had not collapsed. The calf, though thin and wobbly, moved with bursts of energy. He leaned against her flank and stepped back again, testing each limb, weaving slightly on the uneven earth. He nudged her belly once, then turned toward the sound of water being poured behind the gate. Her trunk didn't stop him, only followed the motion loosely, curving around his back before falling again. Elias watched from a distance. He hadn't approached since morning. He remained seated on the outer ridge, just above the gate corridor. His hands rested on his knees, his back curved slightly forward, as though waiting for a verdict. There had been no decision made, no signal passed. But the moment had arrived anyway. At the far end of the reserve, a gap had been opened in the fencing. Not wide, but enough to guide movement. It wasn't a full release. It was a corridor, a soft channel leading back into the hills where the land rose gently toward the last pockets of green before the dry season deepened. It was not safe, but it was space. And space was something they now needed more than protection. The mother shifted her weight. Her trunk lifted and dropped. The calf moved first, 3 hesitant steps toward the gate, then a pause, then one more. He turned, looked back, ears hanging loose. She followed. It wasn't graceful. Her gait was uneven, her right leg dragging slightly. The swelling had not gone down. Her wound would need time. But she walked. They passed the water basin without stopping. Dust lifted gently from beneath their feet. The guards posted near the gap did not speak. They simply stepped back into shadow. The mother paused once halfway through the corridor and turned. Her eyes scanned the open plain. Then she looked up, toward the ridge where Elias still sat. Their eyes met. No sound passed between them, no sign, just one still glance, held long enough to carry meaning without explanation. Then she turned again. They crossed through the last of the wire posts and onto the open path beyond. The calf stayed close now, not darting ahead. He matched her pace, stride for stride, despite his thin legs. The land ahead was quiet, open, touched faintly by wind and dust, and the scent of drying acacia. If her strength failed in the coming days, they would try again. If the calf lost weight too quickly, he would be tracked and helped. But if they kept walking, if they kept choosing each other, there was still time.